Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy Turkey Day. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there.
Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yes, whether you're eating it or just admiring the magnificent bird that it is for all that it does. Happy Thanksgiving and Turkey Day. We did not plan this. This was not something that we had originally set out to do. It was initially just going to be a nice, quiet hangout on Thanksgiving and, enjoy a nice conversation. But as it so happened, that conversation talked about issues of the day, as many of you may have had or were unable to avoid. It ended up going to the Rittenhouse situation. And my mother doesn't really watch the news. She's not really plugged in per se, which is in many ways really good. I'm trying to go that direction myself. I've chosen to watch some response videos to the trial, and not even ones that disagree with the verdict, but ones that agree with it, but then say, oh, Kyle shouldn't have been there, or he's a hero. All he did was defend himself. And I want to speak directly to that lie, that misconception, and the perversion of truth that we have right now. So everybody knows pretty much the story of David and Goliath. It's a metaphor in our pop culture and everything now. Little guy, David, young man, teenager, fells a giant with a stone, and then uses the giant's own sword to cut his head off. And it goes on from there, but that's the story that everybody knows. What many people don't seem to know or have forgotten is what led up to that, which was the army, the battle lines were drawn, Philistines and the Israelites, and nobody was doing anything. They weren't engaging. And every day, Goliath would come out, he would make boasts, proclamations, taunt the Israelites. He would mock their God, he would mock their way of life, he would mock them in general, saying, hey, you guys, you got nothing, your whole way of life, your existence, your God, who is he, where is he now? He would mock them, and not only them and God, but
their covenant. The United States has made covenants with God. The original founders have made at least one or two that I know of covenants with God.
And so he would mock that as well. And so nobody was doing anything. So David shows up one day bringing provisions to his brothers who were on the battle lines, and he hears Goliath come out and start insulting them and making a mockery of everything. And he says, who the heck is this guy? Why are we sitting around letting him do stuff? Why isn't anybody going after him? Why are they just letting him run his mouth like that? And they said, shut up. You're a kid. You don't belong here. Go back home to dad. Starting to sound familiar? You don't belong here. You're a kid. Why is a kid here? We're soldiers. We've got our armor. We've got our weapons. We've got this system in place. The king is here. The governance is here. If we're letting it happen, you should too. Go home. You're a kid. You don't belong here. And that has been the narrative that has been pushed out here, or not the narrative, but the assailant. I'm so flustered. The aggression has come out. Kyle didn't belong there. You know what? Yes. What he did was in self-defense. We're going to acknowledge that, but he didn't belong there. He shouldn't have been there. What is a kid like him doing there? When I was growing up, that's what we described. That's what, in my mind, was a hero. That's what heroes do. Anytime you see something heroic, you could say, what was that person doing there? Why were they putting themselves in harm's way? Why were they sticking their nose into that fight? Why did they put themselves in harm's way? Why didn't they just let it play out and let the cops handle it when they were going to come there? When I was raised, it is standing out and putting yourself at personal risk in order to do something. So on one side, you have destruction, devastation, fear, animosity. That's what the mob was doing. That's what the rioters were doing. That's what the protesters in general were doing. It is fomenting violence. It is fomenting rage. It is fomenting all this carnage. It was destruction. If you listen to the quotes and you listen to the people that were talking on the other side, if you look at the lives of the people that Kyle ultimately ended up having to take, it was wicked. Wicked, like pure, outright wickedness. This is not, it's another perspective. This was mayhem. This was death. We're going to blow stuff up. We're going to destroy, kill, steal, and destroy. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Because that sounds a whole lot like the devil's agenda. And you want to say, well, we don't want to pick sides, and we don't want to say, well, this is really wickedness, or this is, we should understand and have a dialogue and learn where they're coming from. No, it's wickedness. It's pure, outright wickedness. And we do not cater to that. We don't need to understand wickedness. We need to oppose wickedness. And that's what Kyle Rittenhouse did. He went out there as a boy. You know why? Because the police that were there, the adults, everybody in the armor, the government, the governance was chicken shit. They were backed off. They would not engage. They would not do anything. So who is left? Who is going to actually stand up for people? Who's going to stand up for their property? Who's going to stand up for their well-being? Who's going to say, you know what? This is not something we allow to happen in our country. Who's going to do it? The adults forfeited that. There's many times in the Bible where somebody is forfeited. A king forfeits and says, no, I'm too scared to lead. God says, hey, Deborah, you're willing to follow me. You're willing to go after what I'm willing to go after. You lead my people into battle, into war. Yes, war. God said, go after these people. Go after them because they are perpetuating wickedness and violence in the world today. And that's what's happening now. And so Kyle goes there. He didn't go there to start a fight. Well, he was carrying a gun. Why was he carrying a gun? People get hung up on that. Like it's a horrible thing he went there. That's called self-protection. It's called self-preservation. It's called wisdom. In theory, if somebody sees that I've got a gun, they're not going to mess with me. It's a standoff. Like it wasn't a concealed thing. It wasn't like, I'm going to catch somebody unawares and blow their head off. It was, hopefully this will be enough of a deterrent. And you could tell by the way he used it. If you watch the video, a lot of people haven't actually watched it. You watch the video, this was not somebody who was eager to pull out a gun and start shooting. This was somebody who had it in reserve. It was, again, the idea was it's just there as a deterrent, period. Now, I'm not trying to put that into Kyle's head and say that that's exactly what he was doing, but you can tell when it came down to it, the moment of truth came down to it, he was not eager to pull that trigger. You did not get shot at if you were not encroaching on him and actually in the process of attacking him. That's just the truth of it. But again, that's getting into little details. The bottom line is, this is somebody who everybody is now saying he should not have been there. He didn't belong there. We're not going to do anything about it. We're going to watch the city burn. We're going to just let them destroy property. We're going to let them bully people and intimidate people and have these people do an outright mockery of justice and a mockery of order and a mockery of law. We're going to just let that happen. Let it play out. That's fine. Let them get it out of their system. We deserve it. Whatever bullcrap you want to put out there and try to excuse why these people were doing what they were doing, it's bullshit. It's wickedness, pure and simple. Nobody was willing to do anything. Nobody. I mean, there were people there, obviously, besides Kyle, that were actually engaged, that were actually willing to do something. But he went out there. He didn't go out there to kill. He went out there to protect property. There's footage of him cleaning up graffiti. He actually helped two different people. He was there to administer first aid, and he was putting out fires. So this is the antithesis of destruction. This is the antithesis of carnage, of fear, of destruction. This is a presence going in there and saying, no, this ends here. You don't get to make a mockery of us anymore. And it wasn't aggressive. He didn't go out there and shoot his gun in the air and say, you will not mock us anymore. It was it wasn't even, David went out there and was like, hey, I'm gonna take you on. He talked some trash, threw off the armor, said, I don't need this. I got you. A little more brash, a little more aggressive. Kyle didn't even go out there looking for a fight. He didn't go out there trying to pick a fight. He didn't travel across straight lines to engage with the enemy on a physical level. He went there to fight fire with water. Literally, he went out there with a fire extinguisher to put out gasoline, well, I don't know about gasoline fires because it uses different methods of putting on fire.
Maybe love,
well,
care for human life, whether he's putting out a fire or whether he's administering first aid, or if someone was literally whatever they needed nobody was paying any attention to him and it's life and death for them. He was prepared for all of that kind of situation to clean up, serve. Well, when you're doing that with humanity, that's love toward them. That's caring toward them, the opposite of death and destruction. And he went there with that intent. But he was, like you said, he was not stupid, that he was like, there could be some people, I don't know if you want to say crazy, but people that they're not interested in human life. They're not interested in love. They're not interested in saving lives. They're not interested in serving. They're not interested in helping. They're interested in killing and destruction. And there just are people out there that are interested in that. And you don't go into, nobody does. Our military doesn't, missionaries don't, those are two completely different arenas, but it's the same thing. You don't go into an arena like that and think, oh, well, I'll be okay. You have to go into that arena with wisdom and protection in whatever form that takes.
And there's a very, I call it comic book morality, very superficial morality that says, if you're the hero, it's the hero because they never take a life and they never torture people. They can do the essence of torture. They can beat the crap out of them, but as long as they're not trying to get information out of them, it's okay. So all your Batman and all these superheroes that we put out there and say these are heroes, as long as they don't kill, that's okay. As soon as you kill, you're just as bad as they are, which is absolute nonsense. The essence, when you talk about true heroism, I don't know if you all have seen or have heard stories from war. Their PTSD is not just from watching the person beside you getting his head blown off. It's also taking a human life. Unless you are insane or unless you are completely lost into wickedness, it takes a toll on a human being to take another human life. And Kyle, it was very obvious, again, from his actions, this was not something he was happy to do. This is not something he was like, hey, trigger happy, I'm going to go blow some people up. This was something that, it was a sacrifice he made. Now, again, I'm not saying he's a hero because he defended himself. I'm not saying he's a hero because he had a gun or because he killed somebody or because, he ended up, walking out of there. That's not the hero. The heroism was him actually going there. The thing that people are decrying him for daring to stick his nose into a business and to say no to wickedness, that's what people are decrying him for. That's what makes him a hero. I challenge you right now, describe for me, define for me what you in your mind think a hero is or what heroism is. And tell me that and how that does not line up with a selfless, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to go fix things. And people are saying, well, didn't you know that you're going to piss people off by putting out their fires? I'm sorry, when did we say that that's okay? When did we just say that it's okay for us to be afraid? First of all, afraid of anything. But second of all, afraid of pissing wickedness off? That should be, that's kind of a goal. Like, you're over target if you're getting a lot of flack.
Yeah.
And so this idea that, well, we don't want to make wicked people angry. They should be the one, they had the fear of God in them of what the righteous will do. The heroism, like I said, is not the violence. It's not that he was carrying a gun, none of that. It was his willingness to go into a situation
where it cost him.
Where knowing it was going to cost him, it was going to cost him time, it was going to cost him, he knew he was at risk. Again, that's why he brought the firearm. But again, he didn't go into it knowing that he was going to take a life. But the fact that he did, that takes a toll on a human being. And so whether you're a soldier fighting in a war, whether you're a police officer, whatever you're doing, if you are not wicked, if you are not messed up in the head, taking a life is going to take a toll on you. Mm-hmm. It is a burden to bear. And so when it's like, oh, with great power comes great responsibility. Old Ben says that to Spider-Man. And Spider-Man in the comics so many times lets the villain go because he can't bring himself to take a life. And what does the villain do? It slaughters 20 more people in the next 4 comic strips because he was not willing to do. Because you know what? That takes a toll. Because that's something that he would have to deal with for the rest of his life. That's something that's going to weigh around him. I had a friend that I used to work with at a warehouse. He was a former Vietnam vet, or he was a Vietnam vet and a retired police officer. And when I asked him, ultimately, did you ever have to kill anybody, in Vietnam? He just kind of shook his head and said, "That's just not something I talk about. That's something I just don't talk about." People that are of sound mind, they carry that burden with them. So to say that, we did this and it feels good. Yes, he's still among the living. But the toll that it took on him, that experience and everything that he witnessed, and everything he had to go through, that takes a heavy toll. What did he ultimately do? Again, he provided some form of aid to 2 people. He cleans from graffiti. And you say, okay, well, he didn't save a life. He didn't do anything. He was making a stand. But if I'm not mistaken, there's plenty of times in history where it has been a symbolic stand that somebody did. It was a Rosa Parks. There's something that the action in itself was not transformative. It was not mind-blowing. It was not like this massive feat of heroicism, but it made a stand. It made a statement. That is heroism. That is something that we needed to see. Everybody who says, "Oh, we're celebrating that he's was not found guilty," it wasn't. It is because it was a clear case of self-defense. I mean so. From a law perspective. But what it was is you're allowed to be a champion. You're allowed to go forward. You're allowed to stand up to wickedness and not understand wickedness, not have a dialogue with wickedness, not have a conversation, not try to understand it and be sensitive towards wickedness, but to say, screw you, wickedness. You are not going to run rampant in our cities, in our towns, and in our lives. And we've had it up to here. And many people have felt that. Many people do feel that. Clearly, I kind of feel that a little bit. But we've had it up to here, and we've had it up to here with the rhetoric, the talking. And again, a little hypocritical because that's what I'm doing is I'm talking, but I'm talking directly to the people that are saying you don't belong there. You should not be going out to some place that you don't belong. I'm sorry, where exactly is that? I'm like, is it you have to live in that town, live in that house, have a personal stake in order to do something? Isn't it a little more heroic to do something where you don't have a stake in the game, where you don't have something to lose? It's not your property that's at stake. It's more heroic to say, okay, I'm going to go to a place where I've got nothing, at stake here, but I'm going to put my life on the line. I'm going to put my safekeeping, my health and everything on the line for this.
For those people, for that town, for that city.
And so so there's this disconnect here. I'm like, how can you tout and talk about heroes and people like David? I mean, no, I haven't heard anybody say, well, what was David doing there? Why did David go fight? Why didn't he let the soldiers do their thing? Why didn't he let the king make the decision? He kind of went out there, jumped the gun, and got everything riled up. What if he lost? I mean, I've never heard anybody say that about David. I've never said he wasn't a hero. I've never heard him say he was irresponsible. Right. That's lauded as a story of David standing up against Goliath. And right now, not truly. The landscape is not truly that we are up against a giant. Greater is the army that is with us than is with them. We are not actually facing a giant, but you do have big tech. You do have all these other companies. You have the media that do seem to be, they've puffed themselves super large, and they're paper tiger folks. Sorry, folks. Paper tiger. Never in history has somebody held power where you could just go, you know what, I'm not going to I'm not going to log into Twitter. I'm not going to log into Facebook. Guess what? If people just leave the platform en masse, they have no power. Facebook becomes obsolete and nothing if people just decide, I don't need this. And we don't need it. This is not a necessity. This is not like, hey, I'm not going to get to eat tomorrow. It's entertainment. You can just turn it off. It is the biggest paper tiger because they have absolutely no legitimate power. You can just stop. You can stop watching the news. Once you realize that the news is full of crap and that all they do is spew lies and venom and that they have an agenda of divisiveness and destruction, once you realize that, you go, I would be insane to watch the news anymore. I'd be insane to watch this. And so you turn it off and they wither and die because nobody's actually paying attention, except for the very small margin of people who are actually invested in destroying this country, who are feeding into it, who are buying into it and going, yeah, and they're getting themselves riled up. But for the rest of us, the vast majority of this country, you just turn it off. You just ignore it and it goes away. Biggest paper tiger ever, but yet we see it as big Goliath. But regardless of what the perception or reality is, that was in many ways a little guy going up against something, a mob. So in that case, in a very physical sense, it was a huge mass of people, a huge wave of destruction and death.
I don't think he even went toward the people. He chose to go into a situation that was real, that had a mob and people, but that he was actually going into and up against the wickedness. He was going up against the evil, up against the people that were standing there, or the police, the government, and just go ahead. And he went up against that. I don't know. To me, the word is coward, being a coward, and said, I'm not going to be a coward, and I'm going to go into this situation and do the right things, do the things that are helpful, do the things that bring life. He wasn't interested in the mob. He was interested in going up against what was bringing destruction and death to bring life.
That is a very good point. He was not going there against it. He was standing up against the cowardice and the mayhem and the death, not individuals in particular, but they were drawn to him because he was in defiance of what they were doing.
Yeah, right.
And again, but then even then he did not go, all right, you sons of bitches, and pulls out his gun and starts going to town on him. It was, I'm in the process, after having threatened your life and said, I'm going to kill you if I get you alone, in the process of having the person trying to take a gun from him, that he fires. It's after he's been, somebody's attacking him with a skateboard that he fires. It's when somebody's bringing a gun around to shoot him in the side of the head after pretending like a coward, I'm harmless, I'm not going to do anything, circles around and then tries to kill him, that he shoots the guy in the arm. And once he does it, the next thing is, well, the arm, that's not a kill shot. Shoot him in the arm, the guy could switch hands. He didn't know what the outcome was going to be. In terms of that. So the restraint of going, you've got the adrenaline pumping, you've got all this stuff going on, you've already killed somebody, you've been trying to turn yourself in, you get attacked by somebody else, you kill them, and now there's somebody else coming at you, and you shoot them. I would have, my instinct, everything's going, I would have probably shot again, just because I don't know what the guy's going to do next. Obviously he's very devious and very underhanded and sneaky. How many villains do you see in the movies where it's like, oh no, please don't hurt me. I'm totally harmless. And the hero's like, okay, I'll let you live, but never do this again. And he turns away, and then slow motion, you see the bad guy pull a knife from somewhere where he didn't see it and he throws it. Now again, we're talking about movies here, but the deviousness is not fiction. Right. And we saw it there. You saw it when you do this, like, okay, don't hurt me because I don't want to be hurt. I'm not a threat to you. And then you pull out a gun. That is the epitome of deception and malice, of the wickedness that you see in a movie, and you go, that's horrible. The guy got what was coming to him. But he did, after he shot the arm and realized the guy was not a threat, he didn't shoot him again. So to say that he went out there to kill people or to be able to use his gun, when you see the amount of restraint that he used, and people have pointed this out, rightly so, that, and I would say that the marksmanship was miraculous. A lot of people have said, in that situation, I could not have had that accuracy, would have had stray bullets, I wouldn't have just fired there. All I see is blur. You see people coming at you from all directions, and they're all a threat, So it's like the ability that he had, I would say, was almost supernatural to be able to do that. So. But the restraint that he showed proves out this is not somebody who was looking to do this. He was there with an extinguisher, with graffiti cleaning devices. This is a squeaky stool. And he was going there to to make a difference. And so this is, again,
At
specifically.
a cost to his own life, well-being, reputation, whether he could, with what happened, he could have been put in prison, not in prison, he could have been maimed for life. I mean, he went into a situation at the cost of many, many things for himself. I haven't seen enough or heard, enough of his personal testimony or story, but he very clearly, one way or another, chose to go up against a Goliath, and not a mob, not a government, not a, particular person or people or whatever. He chose to go up against the Goliath of evil that says good is evil and evil is good, and to go in and say, no, I'm saying, no, I'm not just going to stand here and be mocked and let our country be mocked and let evil, destruction and death, if you want to put it that way, destruction and death reign, and say that this is good and this is okay and this is fine, and the government and the police stand down to it for whatever their reasons were. He chose to actually go in, I guess, in a group, and he was with a group of people, and maybe some other people were also doing the same thing, but chose to go in up against the Goliath. And if you think of it in a spiritual sense, or the atmosphere, or the, I don't know, what comes to my mind is spiritual wickedness in high places, but he chose to go up against a Goliath that was saying, it's okay to do this in our country. This is good and this is great. And if you're against that, you need to be killed. And he chose to go up against that Goliath and say, no, I don't, I'm not putting up with that. And if everybody else is going to stand down, I'm going to come up and face you and say no, and I'm going to come in and do good. He didn't come in to fight. He didn't go in to hurt people. He literally came up against a giant, and he's won.
Yeah.
He has actually won. And sometimes miraculous stories, and sometimes that whole thing coming up against, there are tragedies that happen. But he chose, he said, cost or not to me, cost or whatever, we can't let this continue. I don't want to be somebody that lets this kind of atmosphere, this kind of spiritual wickedness, or, big, whatever it is, the atmosphere, the belief system, if you will, even just the belief system, continue to pervade our cities and people and country, because it just keeps going. It's not just empty buildings that, and destruction of cities and properties and personal property. It starts to then encroach on our homes, and then the innocents, like you said, if you don't stop it here, it keeps going. Then innocent lives that are just like sitting ducks get taken if you continue to let that belief system pervade. And he chose not to.
And and we're not saying that he articulated that was what was going through his mind exactly, that I'm going to stand up against this oppression and everything. I'm not trying to attribute a higher motive, but you say, okay, well, what was his motive? Well, you see what he did, and that tells you what he went there for.
Right.
And to me, that is when I try to frame what heroism is. And again, it's not putting on a pedestal. It's not deify and he's the most amazing and worship, but as a complete counter to the people that are saying you should not have been there. Well, then I'm sorry, you don't want a hero. There's no place for heroism as we understand it in our language, in your life, and in historically. Anybody who would have been a hero, you would have said you shouldn't have been there. You were taking unnecessary risks. It was none of your business. That is, for the most part, the more it's not your business, the more selfless it is. The more that it is not something where you have a stake in the game, the more selfless it is, and the more heroic it is. So I don't know how you have to juggle that in your mind, but it was just wanted to put that out there because I kind of, you got up to a bit of a
choking point.
Gag reflex when I'm listening to people say, well, he shouldn't have been there. And it's like, I'm glad that you can actually at least look at the videotape and go, yeah, this is clearly self-defense. But you really need to, I would say, recalibrate or just rethink, reconsider what exactly you would like to see a hero actually do, what actual heroism looks like. If the police were doing something, if the government had condemned the summer of love when people were being killed and there was $2 billion in property damage across the nation with these riots, if the established authority was there, if the Red Cross was there, giving first aid, if the fires were being put out, if things were being done by the institutions that were set up in order to do those things, then he wouldn't have to. If the Israelites engaged
the army and the king.
Yeah, he was 6 feet tall. He was no slouch. They said Saul stood a head and shoulders above everybody else at 6 feet tall. 3 feet shorter than Goliath, but you could still poke him with a sword. He could have done something, but they didn't. There are many times where God says, I want you to do something, and that person forfeits and goes, no, I'm too scared. And he says, okay, I'll choose another champion. And he brings them up, raises them up from a very lowly standpoint. Gideon, again, if you're a believer at all, you look at the Old Testament, every single person you would say, why didn't they just go along? You know what? Okay, so the Israelites were being oppressed. They were getting along. They weren't being killed, right? They were being oppressed. They were having their stuff stolen. They were having their things destroyed. Their crops were being raised, but they were still alive. It's just property. It's just stuff.
But it doesn't stop there. The same with David and Goliath. Goliath, the Philistine army only gave them so many days. It was either 30 or 40 days and said, 30, 40 days, we're going to come out here and we're going to intimidate you. We're going to send our big guy out and we're going to intimidate you with this mindset, with this belief system again and again and again and again. But you only have so many days. And in so many days, if you don't, we're coming after you. And there's a big difference between the Israelites who had a compassionate God and the Philistines who did not have a compassionate God at all. If the Philistines went out over these terrified, cowardly, or they just don't want to fight, or they're just hoping the Philistines would go away, they just get slaughtered. They're not in any mentality to fight for their country, to fight for their women and children back here, to fight for their land, to fight for their lives. They'd have just been slaughtered. And if you read anything about Philistines, it wasn't pretty. And so in this same situation, it might be, let's burn the city. Well, when the city's burned, where is that kind of mentality going to go? It just isn't, it doesn't end, it doesn't stop. If you let that kind of mentality go where we can just keep killing and destroying, and there's no honor, there's no respect, there's no life, there's no anything. Therefore, that kind of mentality doesn't have any stopping point. It's not like, okay, well, it's just the big city. Well, when that's gone, then you go into the suburbs, you go into the homes, you go into the towns. And that whole point of a David going up against a Goliath, against a mentality, a belief system that the Philistines had, that, we don't care, we just destroy whatever, take whatever we want and destroy whatever we want. And David said, you can't do that to us. We're not going to let you do that to us. We're not going to stand for that. You're not going to take our freedom and our lives and everything and just kill and destroy and turn the whole land into, burnt up nothing and people for your use to kill and to do whatever you want with. Somewhere you have to say no. And when you say no against that kind of stuff, one way or another, whether it's in your home, whether it's in the parking lot with someone, wherever it is, there's a cost. There's a price to pay to stand up and say, no, we're not going to let this come and destroy us. We need Davids.
Yeah.
We need Davids. Whether you're a believer or not a believer, or you believe in David and Goliath or God, or doesn't matter, but we need Davids. We need people that are willing to say no. No, we don't want death and destruction. We want life and peace.
And it's much easier. And I think it's a challenge. It is very easy to say, you know what, God will do it all, because it doesn't require me to put myself at risk. It doesn't require me to put my family at risk. There are plenty of people that I respect that make YouTube videos and everything, but have made it very clear they're not willing to sacrifice anything.
Right.
If it's an inconvenience, well, does that really matter? It's just a small thing. That's not a hill to die on. Well, if you're not going to die on a small hill, why in the world would you die on a bigger one with more consequences and things like that? So I'm not throwing stones at people who are not willing to get in the fight. That's fine. But don't put out the rhetoric that nobody else should be there. Pacifism doesn't win anything. If you go back through history, things were accomplished by people who actually did things, for people who took risks, who people actually stood up and actually were bold and lost things.
And fought for their freedom.
Yeah.
They fought for their freedom. And everybody's history is full of Davids and people that were willing to stand up and fight for freedom, to fight for life, to fight for, typically what they say, to fight for what's right. But if you don't like the word right because it's whatever you think is right, but to stand up and fight for life. Is this going to bring life or is this going to bring death? And if it's going to bring death in whatever form, who wants that? Really nobody. Well, there are people out there that actually do. I hate to say that, but there are people out there that do want death. They just want to kill, steal, and destroy. They really do. But most people do not want that. They want life. So it's not so much about what's right or wrong. It's about, is this going to bring life or is this going to bring death? And there are people that want to stand up and fight for life.
Yeah. Yep. Well, so that was our
That's
discussion.
our Thanksgiving discussion over our sandwiches and eggnog.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, good eggnog. Gotta have some of that now. I'm a little bit parched.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to share our happy family time with you as well, and just hope that you're having a great Thanksgiving. Thank you, Mom, for having this conversation or enduring my tirade. And thank you all for watching. Wish you and your family the best. Have a great Turkey Day, and may you find truth to stand on.
And want to fight in whatever way is given to you to fight for life.